Hello and welcome to the Purple Rock Podcast. Apologies for starting a couple minutes earlier, but we actually didn't. We've been talking to each other as though we were podcasting for 4 minutes. That's going to be really great for you guys listening to this on radio.
Radio?
I'm your... Oh, God. Can we start over? Can we start over? I'm your host, Andy. This is the slick production you get when I'm hosting as opposed to talking all the time. There's no John for tonight. Instead, I'm joined by Emma and Matt, the tiny boxes in your screen. Say hello.
Hello!
Hey.
Hey, Matt, do you think you could sit lower, maybe, so that we can't...
No, I can't. I need to eat.
I'm the one in bed. You think I'd be the one lying down.
Yeah, and you're all cozy in your savage-style beanie.
So actually, I have one that's a little more savage style, but it doesn't properly cover the horrendous stuff that's going on underneath it. So.
That's right. She was busy doing yoga before this, and now we're...
You're going to get the wrong impression.
Sure, let's let them. Start the rumors now.
Yeah.
So we're here to talk about the penultimate episode of Survivor Cambodia, and what do you guys think of it?
Clear the deck. No more Abby! Is that a good thing or not?
I don't know. That was the interesting thing, is because I was not shy, at least on Twitter early in the season, not really enjoying. It was too much. It was too much of the passive aggressive. It's too much of the personality stuff that in real life I just can't handle. I can't deal with. But I found myself this episode kind of liking her and thinking it was kind of fun. And then yeah, it was oh, I guess it's Abby. I just didn't expect it to actually be Abby.
Yeah, I think I agree with Matt that this was mostly just a deck shuffling episode. It was not a very exciting episode. And I think one of the major reasons for that, for myself, is that the three candidates to go home, I could take or leave every single one of them. I kind of was like, oh, it's Tasha, Keith, or Abby. Cool. Let's get to the end.
I think kind of the best thing about this episode, though, is the fact that it leaves all the people I'm most interested in seeing in the final still on the show. It's not that I don't think Abby brought something. Wait, did I use a negative right there? Abby brought something to the show. It's just that it's not necessarily what I want to see in the final.
Yeah, maybe we've had our Abby run, and it was good to get her out of the way so that we can focus on the more important things, which is apparently the elimination of still 100 people.
Yeah.
And actually, let's talk about Abby now. I was planning on doing it a little later, but we already are. And it's appropriate as it's our boot episode. Kind of, what was your final take? Emma, you were kind of getting into it that you were, anti-Abby earlier, and then you were starting to come around. What do you think?
Then I listened to her exit interviews, and I kind of flipped back to the other side.
Welcome to the Abby Maria experience.
Yeah, right. And they all say how she's so, all the survivors say, oh, in real life, she's great. She's fun. And I don't know, maybe you might understand me more than Matt, Andy, in that when you're not really a crazy party drinker, it's because Matt's wild. But that's not that enticing to hang out with.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of times it's yeah, she's cool to party with. It's okay, well, still, not interesting to me.
Yeah, and
you know why Abby's good in real life? Because you can walk away and leave her.
That too. Yes.
And I guess we do have a guest appearance. I put the "Do Not Enter" sign on here, but he can't.
Oh, you're so sleepy. Hi.
Hi, Christopher. What woke you up, buddy? Am I podcasting too loudly?
Hi, buddy. Oh, you're so sleepy.
Mama's just upstairs. Do you want to go see Mama? All right, you guys talk about Abby, and I'll be back. This is the excitement of live TV.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I want to quote. I want to quote one of our commenters on the website about Abby because I feel like this is appropriate. And I'm giving a shout out because I wrote down the commenter name. So Scarlett3639 said, "Abby's an onion of unpredictability. just when you think you have it figured out, bam, another layer. And I think that kind of described the Abby Maria experience.
Yeah, because like I was starting to like I don't know, like I when they like tampered down her edit and it was just like comments here and there. Like I got annoyed when she was like being rude to Steven, but I was trying to think like, well, I love Steven, so is that the only reason why, you know? And like, 'cause I just thought that was kind of uncalled for. Also, I hate bathroom humor, so it's like, shut up with your like the poopy pits. I don't like that. But like it's just I don't know her exit interviews when she's just like or her Ponderosa video when she's like I just don't feel like I really got a second chance because people still didn't like me and it's like well
You know,
um
if you meet one jerk during the day,
exactly
but if you're meeting jerks all day, maybe you're the jerk.
like as much as Cass and Sierra were both being like nice to her in that Ponderosa video, the previous one when Joe comes in, who's the one who says we're so glad you're not Abby? It's Cass, and I don't think she was saying because I'm sure want Abby to still be in the game. Like I don't think that's what she was getting at.
I think that's why Steven said that those tensions between Cass and Savage had been building for a while. I think it was because they were both dreading Abby so much that they had like gotten into fights over the fact that Abby might be coming. Because that's what Abby does. She causes people to fight.
Yeah, even just she's like, sorry, you guys aren't gonna really appreciate this, I don't think, but you know how in Philippines Malcolm compared her to a Dementor, how she's such like the fun and the happiness from everything. It's almost like she's more like where did Andy go?
We lost our Andy. Don't worry, guys. Oh my god. Oh my god. You know what this
I don't know what to do.
You're getting mad
Should I keep
at my show right now.
Should I Blackjack and hookers?
Yes. Because sometimes when you feel like you don't need John and you don't need Andy, maybe you want another podcast. Maybe instead of a podcast, you want Blackjack and hookers. So until Andy comes back, I'm hookers, Emma's Blackjack, and we're hosting this show.
Yeah.
And this
Yeah,
is going
for those who
completely
don't
off the
know,
rails. Live TV. Woo!
this has been a running joke for years, which is disturbing that it's been that long. But where Matt and I who are always second fiddle, we're like before Mark was even a glimmer in our eye, like we're gonna make our own podcast with Blackjack and hookers, and of course we can't have me be hookers because that's sexist. So Matt is obviously hookers.
Right, and
Plural.
We're enlightened here at the Prep Rock podcast.
We are. I think we are. Should I keep talking about about Harry Potter?
Do we want to talk about Abby, or should we move on? Because we do have a lot to get to, and Andy's not here. So.
I did have an. Wait, are we even getting? I know it's still live, but is it even being recorded without Andy? I don't know.
I'll just assume that it is.
Anyway, I did have a pertinent point about Abby. So while Malcolm said she's like a Dementor, which if you aren't a Harry Potter fan, or they sort of make everyone really like depressed because they suck every like happiness out. Right. Abby is more like a Horcrux, which makes everyone really irritated and unhappy and angry. And I think that she probably was not created as one. I'm not going to nerd out too much about that, but I think he's back. But yeah, Abby's more like a Horcrux than a Dementor. Hello, Andy. Welcome back to the
Harry
show.
Potter conversation.
Welcome back to Blackjack and Hookers.
Yeah, while you were gone, we talked about Blackjack and Hookers. So.
Oh, fantastic! I'm glad that we finally put that explicit tag on our podcast. Because it kills me not to.
Neither of those are swear words.
Because it kills me not to share my opinion on something, I'll just assume that you guys have talked out the Abby thing.
Yep.
Pretty much. I compared her to a Horcrux.
I'm just these are basically my thoughts. I think that she was probably good in general for the season in that she is a instrument of chaos that the players have to play against and they need to account for, much like the weather or getting sick, or the Survivor gods, which are the producers who will mess with you to make things more entertaining. That's what she is. However,
level of a production twist. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, and that's what she is. And a smarter player will do what we talked about ad nauseum at the beginning of the season, which is remove that agent of chaos. But these guys didn't, unless it led to a lot of interesting things. But I think people have gone too far the other way. Like early in the season, probably when she was taking out all the internet darlings of Shireen, PG, maybe not stepping up for Varner, the hate probably went too far, to use the sports phrase that I'm sure Matt is quite familiar with. However, I think once you kind of hooked up with Kelly and Sierra, and the show stopped focusing so much on her, I think people probably lost sight of something, and all of a sudden, she became too sympathetic, and people were like, "Why are they being so mean to Abby?" Especially, when Crazy Joe fans are giving her death threats or whatever. She is still the person that people didn't like at the beginning of the season. She still is that crazy person. Even though her motives make sense to her, it doesn't mean they make sense. And I feel like that's where it had almost gone too far. And I think as evidence, I would say any single person who's ever played Survivor with her basically has a similar take. Just it depends on degree of how much it annoys them. But anytime it's like, oh, what's it like to play with Abby? They're all like, Abby. So that's not an invention of the show. That's not, people who are cheering too much for Joe or for Steven. That is Abby. That's good or bad. She is a difficult person to live with that I would never want to be around. To Emma's point, she's not somebody that we would hang out with because where she seems delightful is not our area. That said, I don't think she's inviting us, so we're cool there. But I think she is... villain might not be the right word, because she's just chaos.
Is Abby more chaotic than Cass in Cagayan?
Oh yeah, not even close.
Yeah.
I mean, Cass she was chaotic just in that she seemed to change things in ways that those players could not predict. But if you could think about it, it actually kind of was predictable. Cass wants to matter, so she will do things. But she's not hard to deal with. She will talk to you in an unnervingly calm manner. Whereas Abby, with Abby, you never know what to do. Like, her allies will just be saying, oh man, like me and Cass are off to the side having a conversation about our kids, and Abby will be like, what are you guys doing? Are you guys conspiring against me? And that must be exhausting. Which I think leads to the question, should they have voted her out? If she's this, jury-losing goat, was it the right move to get rid of her? And yes. I'll let somebody else talk now.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends upon who you ask, but for someone like Tasha, yes. Because if Tasha's looking at her 4, she might think she's on the top, but she also might think that she's not necessarily on the top with everyone else. And so if they're making a decision there at Final 4 and say it's Jeremy, Spencer, Tasha, and Abby, Jeremy and Spencer are going to want to take Abby over Tasha because they know they can beat Abby. And in Tasha's mind, she might be thinking, well, I don't want them taking someone instead of me. This is kind of like the Suri, remove the goat below me, even though they're not thinking of themselves as a goat. Remove the person these other people perceive as a goat. I put the quotation marks in the wrong place. Damn the video.
Don't worry, on the podcast it makes perfect sense.
Perceive.
Yeah, exactly. Remove the person they perceive as the goat, so that when they're looking on who to take, there isn't this easy choice.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That's kind of the pitch that Joe gave last week, and I'm sure he's delighted to learn that people were listening to it this week. If you are an alliance of 3, then maybe it's just best to eliminate that temptation of that 4th. I also think that for Spencer, for Tasha, because it was basically them that the episode presented as the deciders on this. Tasha decided to make that we're voting out Abby, and then Spencer decided which side he was going to take, and we'll talk about both of those decisions in a little bit more depth. But I think it was just let's remove this element. What I've been saying, element of chaos. Even though it's this close, it's that there's a lot of moves to make to get to the end game, and it's almost impossible to make those moves if she's around. Yeah, it was probably a little easier at the beginning of the game, or at like post merge, not beginning of the game, but post merge, because they weren't working with her. That was somebody else's headache.
Right.
But if they were going to go forward, whether it's this vote or a few more with Abby around, I mean, we saw in this episode, you can't have a private conversation without her flipping out about it. Let's talk about that. What did you think about Tasha's little, asking for permission thing?
That was so stupid.
It kind of felt like Tasha had just been worn down by Abby and was just, had no answers anymore and had to deal with her. Knew she wanted to talk to Jeremy. And, I would not be surprised if she had maybe walked away and Abby had just followed her, or had done that in the past, because we saw Abby following Joe around in the past. And it's just kind of like, I don't know what to do. Let me just ask her, because I just don't know what to do anymore. Either that or it's really stupid.
I would say, like, for a typical, like, normal person that you'd be dealing with, it was, dumb. They'll be like, hey, excuse me, person I'm trying to pull into my alliance, go away now so we can discuss what we really want to do. Yeah, that's bad. But I do think it's the Abby of the situation that draws this out in people, and I say that because of the way Tasha was asking. Like, the way you talk to, like, I don't know, a 4-year-old who has their hand on the detonator of a bomb. It's like, hey, would it be okay? Would you mind at all if maybe we go do this thing? Like, it just seemed like this mix of resignation and fear in her voice. And that's the sort of thing, like, I could see that maybe just get rid of that. And even if it might weaken your chance at winning in a final 3, even if it might make the numbers on each side just too closer for comfort, it's just too hard to play Survivor if Abby's in Survivor. Emma?
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree that Abby is difficult. I will always agree with that. The one thing I almost wonder, and like I can get why, maybe Abby was following them, maybe there's just no way they could get away with going to get water or anything like that. I wondered maybe though if she had just waited to have that conversation, because she's close enough. Tasha is close enough with Jeremy that I think she could pull this off. Waited for people to get back from reward so that there were more people around. So it's not, so there's distraction. So there's like, it's a little easier for them to just slip away, maybe Abby's in a conversation, so you use that and then you go. Like, did it have to be right then?
I mean,
especially if they're using Abby as a vote anyway. Like, it wouldn't seem like what they're discussing is more down the line. Like, did it have to be in that moment?
It probably did, actually, because they were probably discussing whether or not they were going to use Abby or whether they were going to wait for Spencer to come back and go with him. And so if they're making this decision before they come back from reward, they don't want, if they decide to go with Abby and the people that weren't on reward, they don't want the people on reward seeing them discussing that.
They can have 5 people vote with them. Like, they can have Spencer and Abby. They did, technically. I mean, they, voted for Abby, but, like, Abby voted, like, with the way, she was told by that group, not by Kelly and Keith, so.
And, yeah, I mean, and it signals, and if Abby felt, put off by that, she was right to, because, they are talking about whether they actually should go with you or not.
Right.
But if it was a more rational player, if it was Kelly Wentworth on the beach with them, and they were like, hey, okay, we're just going to go talk this over, she would have been like, okay, I understand, cool. And while you're over there talking it over, I might actually have a side conversation with Kimmy. But with Abby, you can't do that. And, again, she's not wrong to feel excluded. They're literally asking permission to exclude her. But it just shows that strategy and just rational adult decision making is not in the Abby Maria bag of tricks for Survivor.
Right.
Yeah. Let's so they chose the big choice this episode was Spencer's. He could have gone with one side or the other and basically decided his path till the end, except that nothing in this season has actually gone from point A to the next point. Why do you think Spencer chose to team with Jeremy, Tasha, and Kimmy? and we'll start with Emma.
But Emma doesn't know.
Matt!
Okay, I think Spencer might be thinking at this point that if he reaches the end in any configuration, he has a good chance to win. And if that's what you're working with, then you want to go with the configuration that you're more likely to reach the end with, the one that you know that you're in that final three. And the problem with going with Abby, Keith, and Kelly is that he's not in that final three. He's number 4 there. Whereas
he needs to win the immunity. Yeah.
He needs to win the immunity, and he probably could, but Keith is no slouch. And and just when you're saying that you're number 4, that doesn't mean that the other 3 can't take the chance to vote you out before 4. Just to say that you're a 4 against what once was a 3 but is now a 2, they can vote you out anytime.
Yeah, they could take care of Jeremy and Tasha, which sounded like that was their preferred order. He had to actually talk them down to that and reverse it to make it Tasha, Jeremy. And then, do you think they'd be highly motivated to keep Spencer over Kimmy?
Nope. I mean, and so the thing about going with Jeremy, Tasha, and Kimmy is that, yes, Jeremy seems, to the viewer, much harder to beat. And I'm sure on the beach, Jeremy also looks pretty impressive. But
especially when it starts off, am I right, Emma?
Yeah.
Objectify.
Spencer's getting so skinny.
Yeah, everybody is.
Spencer's skinny to win him now.
When you lose about 13 pounds, it doesn't really change your body shape. People can't see Emma laughing. I should let her make noise so she gets full screen.
But yeah, so I think that's what Spencer is working with. I think Spencer thinks that he's done enough in this game that if he gets to Final 3, he has a very good shot to win. And so I think his focus right now is getting there, and I think this is the crew that makes it easier for him to get there.
And I think that was probably last week, and kind of to a lesser extent this week as well, Tasha's decision making as well about going with the women or sticking around with Jeremy and Spencer.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it is everybody's focused on, everybody, I mean, online, focused on who they should go to the end to beat, and they're skipping over the step of get to the end. And I do think that a big motivation for both Tasha and Spencer has been, I don't want to join alliances that want to get rid of me before the end. And I think this is, you could maybe suggest this is some influence of Tony on Spencer, because Tony always made sure to keep other people ahead of him that could be targets. Those people were Spencer and Tasha.
Right. Rob C, he compared Spencer's decision to his own decision. Only he said that Spencer made the other decision from what Rob made. But I think the difference is that Rob, when he got out Alex, he had bonds with Matthew, with Butch. Now they weren't like the strongest bonds, but to Matthew and Butch, Rob was like in their plans. If Spencer goes to Abby, Keith, and Kelly, I don't think it's like a Rob going to Matthew and Butch situation. I think it's something very different. I think Spencer really is on the bottom there. I think you're right that it's much more of a Tony decision to make to stay where he is, where Jeremy is the prime target.
Yeah, because it seemed like a lot of times in Cagayan that Tony had flipped. He was going to the other side, but no, he just flipped right back. He's using these people to get him one vote ahead, and that's kind of what Spencer did with the Stephen vote.
Mm-hmm. And it's probably when comparing to Rob C, probably worth mentioning that Jeremy and Tasha were smart enough to be a lot more forgiving to bringing Spencer back than Jen and Heidi were, which was the opposite of forgiving.
Yeah, he wasn't calling them awful as much, and I think the problem was that there wasn't a lot of coffee breaks in the Amazon, because I find that just long walks on the beach holding your coffee cup is really a way to bond with your brochacho.
I'm pretty sure I've had dates that were less romantic than Jeremy and Spencer's long walks on the beach together.
That just doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
Yes, he heard the way you text.
Oh, come on.
So if that's what we think that Spencer was doing, do we also think that that was the right decision, or is he, like, is Spencer as set up to win as we think he might be?
I kind of think so. Yeah, I feel like Spencer's in a really good spot. I mean, I still don't think he can beat Jeremy, but I think he's the only one where if they're sitting next to each other, that seems possible. I mean, and you also have to consider Spencer has now won 2 immunities, I believe. I imagine that he would probably win another in the finale if he gets to the end. He's building up like kind of a resume of physical success, strategic success, social success, and it really, I think he's done a lot, and I think people like him enough that they will actually acknowledge it.
What do you think, Emma?
I think there have been theories that he could be the guy who betrayed people, who is seen as the betrayer. Like, as good as his relationships were in the game to make people always think he's on his side, that means when they leave, they thought he was on their side. And now it just depends. It's like, and you can't even be like, as much as we think, oh, they're all returnees, they're going to be thinking on strategy and how you'd think, especially someone like Steven, who Spencer certainly betrayed. On the other hand, the only other all returnee seasons we had, All Stars certainly had some voting based on, who made them less upset. And even Heroes versus Villains, like, not to at all diminish Sandra's game, like, she was great, but, she got most of the Heroes votes for a reason.
I think
Yeah,
she got
I mean,
all the Heroes votes.
Yeah, I
yeah,
think I meant to say all, but whatever. That's fine.
you were hedging with most. Yeah, I do worry about that for Spencer. I think one of the reasons why he feels like he's playing a really good game is he's being edited as though he might be the winner. And what I've been struggling with is that because he is, which maybe, or is it because Spencer seems to know very clearly what the producers are looking for in every interview, how they're trying to frame his story, and he will give that to them in every confessional. So it's like, oh, that's the winner's clip, that's the winner's edit. But it all seems confessional more than necessarily like a reaction from the other players. Now, I will say the other players have all responded, well to him by evidence of the fact that he's, still there, and everybody keeps trying to woo him over to their side. And I think that speaks well of him in that he seems like somebody who will work with everybody. But what I've been thinking about is just if he, like, who are his guaranteed jury members? And, obviously it always depends on who he's against. But let's presume he's against real competition, be that Kelly or Jeremy or both. Who is solidly pro Spencer? Because we know people that are solidly pro Kelly. I think we know some people that are solidly pro Jeremy. Who are Spencer's people?
Well, I think the thing about Spencer is that his appeal, I think, might be broad. I don't think it's as deep as some of the people remaining. I think that's kind of what you're getting at. Whereas I don't know if there is really anyone that is absolutely positively Spencer. But I think there's a lot of people that are in the maybe Spencer, like these strong maybes. And so while there are people that might be able to lure them away from Spencer, it's also possible that Spencer could lure them to him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, like, I don't know if there's a lot of no Spencers. The one
Yeah.
thing I worry about is what, Emma brought up is there's been multiple jury members who have, said in exit interviews that they felt particularly betrayed by Spencer. Maybe that multiple is just two. I think Joe and Steven are the names. I'm not sure if there's anybody else. And that's just the thing. Like,
It's
is
hard to
he going to
say
take the heat?
whether. Yeah, sorry, to interrupt, but it's hard to say whether, like, for a while it seemed like Cass and Spencer are actually, like, mostly okay, but unless he's somehow only up against Tasha, like, if he's up against Kelly, he does not get Cass
Yeah, that's the thing.
at
Like,
all. If he's
there's
up against Jeremy, like, maybe, but, like, I feel like probably not still. you know.
No,
Yeah.
I feel that if Spencer's up against Jeremy and not Kelly, I feel like he gets Kelly's. I feel like he gets the voting block that we assume to be for Kelly, and I think that's because they saw Jeremy as kind of the leader of the opposing alliance, whereas Spencer was more willing to work with them, and it's almost like he will be like the honorary like last member of them, even though I don't, even though I don't think he was ever really with them. I feel like he was someone who started off on the bottom of that big alliance and worked his way into power positions. And I feel like if he's just against Jeremy, he might be getting the Kelly vote, the Cass vote, the Sierra vote, maybe even the Abby vote, though predicting Abby is very difficult.
All right, so this is
Yeah.
what I'm doing right now. I'm kind of trying to make Kelly Wentworth's face at the end of last Tribal Council,
Yeah.
where she's trying to do the mental math of who just stabbed her in the back, and she's trying to figure out two. And one of those people was Spencer. So maybe I think I might agree with you that he was somebody that they could talk to, that they could work with. They worked with on the Stephen vote. They worked with on the Joe vote. Not that that required a lot of work. But he just betrayed them now, and if Kelly goes out, Spencer is another person that she can point, or might be the main person that she can point to that ruined her game. And with Cass, I don't think she had any hard feelings with Spencer because it was, pretty much
Right.
unanimous vote. However, Spencer's only in the game to the grace of Cass, right?
Right.
Yeah. Is she going to be able to stomach him winning?
Oh no,
That's
a good point. I didn't consider that. I was putting Cass as a maybe there.
Yeah, that's that doesn't fit the narrative that she might want to leave Survivor with. But yeah, like if she wanted to vote him out pre-merge, he'd be gone. And the final two, there were people that had opportunities to get rid of him there. And that's the one thing I've worried about throughout is that Spencer has gotten saved by a lot of people. The Monica vote would be another one with Jeremy and Steven. And never really called in those markers. He never really repaid the debt. He, voted them all out, and that's fine for me. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the jury. So it's just I'm not, and they say I think is he a definite contender to win? Absolutely, he might win the season. He might be the winner, but I also think it's a non-zero chance that he might take all the vitriol in front of a jury.
He might.
But he might. So. This season, I don't know if anybody noticed, but they've talked once or twice about voting blocks and no alliances. And is that true? Is that just a talking point, or is this truly a season that with no alliances or very fluid alliances? I know you had a lot of thoughts on this, Matt.
I did, and then I started looking at the vote breakdown, and my really strong thoughts have kind of weakened. Basically, my strong thought before tonight was that no, there have been alliances. It was that big alliance, and there have been a couple Tony-esque votes that went against that, where one person flipped, and then they came back. Only, in a couple cases, it was usually more than one. Except there really was, if you look at it, I really think what happened was there was, 3 alliances, rather than the 2 we assumed there was. I think there
are blocks of people who
voting in different ways.
Yes, which is why my position has weakened there. But I think really what it was that 2 of those blocks were just really strongly aligned, and then they started to eat each other before they had to. And I think it's because one of those blocks was pretty much all the old school. It was the Wigglesworth, Joe, Keith. And even though 2 of those people are more recent, they're still playing the game. They were still playing the game as if it was older school. And so I think what just happened was the Jeremy, Steven, Spencer, Tasha, Kimmy, which I really think ended up being the core 5. I think they saw that older group and started to eat them before that group could use the lesser people. But I think the Steven vote was that group, counterpunching there. And I think when people are kind of looking at this season and they're saying it's unpredictable, what I think is really happening is that the side that loses the vote has been reacting, and they've been reacting effectively enough to where they're able to then win the next vote. And that's why there was such a crazy series of episodes there where we saw, idol play, then we see Wigglesworth go, then we see another idol play, then we see Steven go. What's really happening is that everyone on the bottom is just reacting, and they're doing it effectively, and they're getting their way.
Yeah, I think also what's happening is the self-interest is, and now I'm starting to hear myself on your end, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, the self-interested players within I think the main block or alliance, and I think why you think about like an alliance is kind of Jeremy and his people have been a solid thing throughout that other people have been reacting to, but they've been be it Spencer or others, maybe it's mostly just Spencer, has been willing to use the people on the bottom to further their ends, and that's why it's felt different. But I think just by calling it different on the season, by saying it's a voting block versus an alliance, has almost made it true in the sense that there hasn't been that unifying factor of an alliance. That that group think of you turn against us, you go. Flippers never win, or to quote maybe a smarter player in Rob, and that fear keeps people loyal. By not emphasizing alliances, they haven't had that tool to keep people in line, and maybe that's been okay. Like it probably hasn't really hurt Jeremy that much that like Savage and Joe and Steven have taken the bullets that should by rights have been coming for him.
I mean, that's why he had them there, right?
Can we just take a moment to give it up for how well that's worked? Jeremy hasn't received a vote yet.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of, well, for one, bravo, Jeremy. It's to your point. The other thing is maybe he just isn't coming off as fearsome as everybody else. But yeah,
which again was his plan.
Yeah, no, and he spelled it out in pregame. He spelled it out at the beginning, and if you're looking for one unifying story throughout, that might be it.
And I mean, the likelihood of him getting to the end with weak enough competition makes this impossible. But in theory, he could get a perfect game, which would be crazy. But I don't think it'll happen just because because for the first time in a while, we're entering a finale where there are multiple options to win, which is great.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we had a finale where there was, two people where I could say could be either of these people.
I'd say not two. Kagian had two heading into the final. Spencer and Tony.
Oh, right. Spencer was still there. We were just pretty sure that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. I would say the one
and where... Wu, I mean, everybody thought Wu was going to win.
I would say I'd say the one where it was last really up in the air was Philippines, where it really could have been Malcolm or Denise.
Yeah.
And we really had no idea until we actually saw who made the final three.
And that was great because I was like, either of them, that's fine. I'm good with them both. Philippines is so good.
Yeah, and I feel the same way now. There are three people who could win, and only three. But I'm fine with any of the three. I think I have a preference, but I will not be upset.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I just thought of is Jeremy kind of playing like a Yule game? He is an athletic guy, but he's not the one winning the challenges out there. But he is sitting at the center of his alliance. He's calling a lot of the shots. No one's calling him the Godfather, but for the role he's in, he might as well be. And no one ever came for Yule. Now that was because Yule had the idol, but
they actually did come from him. Adam and Parvati offered their votes to flush the idol once because
that's
genius.
It just didn't work.
They were like, yeah, whatever, Adam. Just
go make out with Candace.
Well, I mean, he's playing a bit of a Yule game in that he's playing a great game. I'll say that. And that's the Yule game. So yeah, I think it's not just been talk. I think that this isn't quite an alliance season, and maybe that a reason for that is simply because of the 3-tribe, 2-tribe, or 2-tribe, 3-tribe, 2-tribe split, and that it created so many different pockets and groups of people that it was tough for a big alliance to coalesce. Like to Matt's point, that there was that kind of that subgroup of Joe Keith and maybe a couple of others who had spent time away from Jeremy and such. Savage was pulled away and then pulled back. So I think what they were trying to do was bust up predictability, and wow, that worked.
Right. Well, I think what happened was that people formed multiple bonds with what turned out to be different groups. So it became a lot easier to move between groups because you're like, well, yeah, these are the people that I'm with right now, and I'm good with them. But I've also spent time with these people, and I'm good with them too. So it makes it easy for someone who has lots of bonds to do that, and because they got switched up so much, Spencer played with almost everyone in the pregame. So for him, moving around was he knew everyone.
Yeah, and I think this is a half-baked theory that I've been working on, but it seems like every time there's a reward, the people that are together at the reward are like, oh yeah, okay, let's do a thing. And usually, everybody always tries it at the reward, either at the reward or the people left behind. But there's usually like, everybody's like, yeah, whatever. We're not actually going to turn our alliance. Whereas whether it happens or not, it kind of feels like because everybody has different connections, they're all willing to entertain the notion that, okay, sure, let's flip the game with these people. Or at the very least, let's listen and then take that information. And yeah, I think that's it. That everybody has different relationships with it, and I also think it's the theme of the season. All reports suggest, Steven mentioned this again on his blog, that they're kind of a little more amped to put on a show, and thus not many people are comfortable with the idea of, you know what, let's just let this sit. Let's just do our thing, ride it out to the end, and see what happens. Obviously, there were some, like that was literally Andrew Savage's plan, but for the most part, a player like Spencer, a player like Jeremy, a player like Kelly, a player like Tasha are like, yeah, let's flip things around. Let's do stuff. This is what the fans voted us for.
Dance, monkeys, dance.
I mean,
and hey, bravo for them.
Right, like John said, people want their shine.
Yeah. Who's John? I've
the guy who we've killed and taken his place.
Excellent. I went dark. So I was thinking the rest of what we could do, because I think we've squeezed every little bit of content out of a fairly straightforward episode last night. Let's talk about all the players heading into the finale. Now I believe we've kind of talked all we need to talk about with Spencer. So let's talk about Kelly. Probably the first thing I want to talk about Kelly is that last week I floated a theory that she might not be getting the respect that we think she deserves from the players there. I was getting that from like exit interviews and all that. And then last night it was like spoken out loud by Tasha and Spencer. Does that worry you, Emma?
Well, kind of, but not really. I actually think it could benefit her in getting her to the end, because if they're not as afraid of her, and then she's pretty intelligent. Like, I know usually they kind of have their minds made up when they go to tribal, but if it's a final three that's like really stacked, they might not. Like, it's easy to have your mind made up when the finale is Natalie Anderson, Missy, and Jacqueline. But it's a little harder if it's going to be like Jeremy, Spencer, and Kelly, which probably won't happen, but it would be so cool. But the thing is, and we talked about this privately, but for those who read Steven's blog, he talks about how well Kelly is playing the jury already, how Cochran gave him advice before going out there to make the jury just wants to feel like they matter and that they are still involved, and that that Cochran and Caramone was always sure to still mention them by name, be like I think I even kind of remember him doing that with Malcolm and Andrea, but just sort of talking about the game at Tribal, but mentioning, oh well, when this happened, and so they feel like they matter. And while Kelly hasn't been doing that necessarily, he has spoken about the faces that apparently some people think show her arrogance or whatever. It is something the jury finds like, she's playing to them.
Yeah.
The way that the players want to put on a show for us, she's also putting on a show for the jury, a lot of whom are Survivor fans, whether they were beforehand or just are because they've played, and putting on a show for them while they're watching it. And being like, yeah, we got out Joe. Oh my God, this is crazy, and stuff like that. And so these, when they're exiting, maybe they're not seeing it when they're out there, but when they exit and they think about and they hear from other people, and you have Sierra and Cass talking. Abby said in her exit interview that one of the reasons she didn't vote with Kelly is because she knew, even though she'd been tight with, Abby tight with her, is that Kelly was playing a really good game, and she knew that, and so that's someone who's been working with her more, and I know we can't really trust what Abby's going to say at Ponderosa, but that's someone who was aware of it. So jury Ponderosa matters. Like, people, they're not supposed to, but they talk about the game, so they might see it once they're outside of it, and that was maybe a little rambly.
Yeah, I was thinking that Steven's blog just reinforced how right I was, and I often think that when I
I am
read stuff.
shocked. I'm
Uh,
that's where you're
but
at.
it's like that, and I think especially the other side, the people not working with Kelly, are clearly overlooking her. That's why they voted out Sierra and Abby ahead of her, right? They voted for her that one time simply due to challenge stuff, and I think it's good. Yeah, it might have even been Savage's pick because that's how he framed Survivor, and that Abby and Sierra are worthless, so they don't deserve to win because they cannot win challenges, and Kelly seems fit, and hey, she's won a challenge.
Savage is picking out all the final jury threats. He wanted to get out Spencer. People didn't listen to him. He wanted to get out Kelly, and she played her idol. I mean, let's just acknowledge this.
Yes.
Way to stay on brand.
No.
So yeah, I think that's what under the radar is that people are underestimating you. The concern I had last week was that if you stay too far too long, that people don't realize that you were playing a good Survivor game until it's over, and they'd have not had their chance to say. And I was wondering that it could mean one of two things, or I guess three. One, they never get a chance to assess her within the game, so this was the first time that they've noticed. Two, that they didn't in the final jury. They thought she was useless and then realized they were wrong. Or three, that it means absolutely nothing. I will say this doesn't worry me anymore for her chances to win because there's time. There's time for her to, get off the radar. And I think
She's still got that idol.
Yeah, it was the plan. I think this was her plan. She was down numbers, like right from the merge. And the first thing she did is, not vote with Cass and Sierra and Abby, I guess. She's just like, no, let me hide over here. And she's worked from the shadows. And, there's been people that are on that jury that she worked with, not just, her witches, but I think Joe probably has a little bit more respect for what she did. I think if she can get Spencer on there, he'll know. So I'm not worried that, Tasha kind of calling her a goat, although even there it was a little unclear whether Kelly was. It seemed more like they were focused on Kim and Abby, and maybe the worry was that Kelly is going to get to ride that wave.
Right.
But it kind of made it semi-clear that they were not perceiving her as one of the stars of the season or one of the big threats.
I do also want to just add that Russell thought that Sandra was a goat.
I don't know about that.
So, Tasha's assessment might not be on point because I think there's kind of been a running theme this season that Tasha's assessments are not that good. I should speak up. They're not that good.
I think she fairly accurately assessed Abby, though. I'll give her credit for that.
Yeah,
I think that's the point.
That to do.
Yeah, Kelly's what she's trying to do is to get people to underestimate her now. She just needs to make sure that they don't all the way, and I have confidence that she can. And in fact, why are we seeing so much of Kelly if she is truly a goat? Like, edit-wise, if she's this, kind of also ran, not famous person. Obviously, there was the idol thing, but we're still getting a lot of her. The camera focuses on her a lot, and it was particularly telling in this most recent Tribal Council that it kept going to her for reaction shots and held on her at the end, as though that's the story that's going to propel us into the final. Like she's hatching a plan. Yep. So, from that, it makes 100% sense why they're going to focus on Jeremy, because I think he has been kind of the power behind the power. It makes 100% sense of Spencer because people love him and he can talk, and he's been moving around. But Kelly really only makes sense if she is a major player this season, and one of the ways she'd be a major player is if she's the winner of this season. So,
although to be fair, we do know at the very least she makes the finale.
Yeah, but so does Kimmy, and that didn't help.
True.
Like
But
nobody has been.
Kimmy doesn't make the same face as the tribal council.
Yeah, I know. I mean, she's expressive, but I feel like they've been giving us a lot of Kelly, and I mean, she's earned it. She's
It
made
might
good
be.
television.
I mean, it might be because Kelly is the face, the last surviving member of the Minority Alliance,
Hmm.
the last one not in that other alliance. So you want a face to that. You want to build someone up there so that
Like
people.
they built up Brett and Samoa,
Wait, who?
How did he was beautiful. How dare you?
and he was the face of that other side. But no, I think that is the point. Like, I'm not
The
saying that
beautiful
Wait,
face.
wait, no, seriously, stop. There was someone named Brett in Samoa.
he was one of the not Russells, I think.
I'm still upset that you guys wouldn't let me put him on our hypothetical all-star beauty tribe.
So yeah, I mean, I
He's
think
so
that some
cute.
people were a little alarmed by that, and obviously a lot of people were defensive about Spencer and Tasha's insinuating that
Right.
the great Kelly Wentworth was a goat. But I'm not too worried about it just yet. But at some point, she's gonna have to get off the radar. Luckily, as Emma has alluded to, she has another great tool to help her with that. She, might put on two great shows for that jury, and for a bunch of Survivor fans, that might go a long way.
And I
Uh,
mean, I think I don't know, this might be stepping on future toes notes and whatever, but considering, final six, okay, there's two more tribals that can be played. It's, that four Bion group and Keith and her now. Like,
right.
and Keith could very well play immunity. Like, there's a very solid chance that she is going to need to play that idol and is going to have a really obvious tell that she's going to need to play it. Like, I mean, she
At
might
this
not.
point, it's almost impossible to imagine a scenario where she's blindsided.
Right. Like,
Agreed.
it would be because the thing is too, even like I mean, I don't know, it could like it's hard to sorry, that's I'm not doing well with words right now. Jeremy may have two or has had two idols, so in theory he should know that it's possible. And he already underestimated Kelly, so you'd think he would avoid that again. On the other hand, it's hard. I can definitely see it being hard for them to imagine that she found another one.
Well,
Yeah.
simply also because she's been on the bottom, so there's
You'd
always
think
that.
she,
Why hasn't she played it yet? If she has one, but
right?
also it could be part and parcel, and maybe this is her story that y'all kept underestimating me, and I've had idols, and I've played you all. I've been able to work with who I need to work with. I got you guys to vote Abby out instead of me. Like you guys were the ones that was playing. I was owning, and
Right.
she's not gonna go home with the idol in her pocket. I think that it's possible she plays it and didn't need to, and then thus it doesn't make a big impact. Because she could play it at 6, and maybe the vote was for Keith or something. But I do think that there's better than 50% odds that she bounces somebody else out because of her idol, or something
Or
even more
Or
exciting.
total
or
manipulation.
Oh, hold on, wait on that. So, yeah, that's where Spencer and Kelly are at. Let's go to our third contender to win, and that's Jeremy. What does he? I don't. I think if he gets to the end, there's a very good chance he'll win.
Yeah.
Not 100%.
Belle's pregnant, mic drop.
Yeah, and he's been holding on to that. But what does he need to do to get there? Is it clear sailing, or is he now kind of run
No,
out of?
final four is going to be really rough for him. I think I don't think anyone's going to target him at the next vote. He's going to play his idol just to be safe at 5.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to figure that he'll be good until final four. And then
Or
well, no, but I think even in that scenario, I don't think he would then be able to be voted for. But
no, but I mean, if that was at 6.
Yeah,
no.
and if it is at 6, he'll know. He's pretty connected to everybody. I think he's got his finger on the pulse. I don't think these people are capable of blindsiding Jeremy at this point.
I just mean if he had to play it at 6, he can't play it at 5 because he already played it. That's all I meant. Carry on.
But anyway, so I do think that Jeremy has pretty smooth sailing to 4. But at 4, you got to think that everyone's going to be worried about Jeremy. And the question really is, has he built up relationships with other people there that he has at least one person willing to tie a vote if he doesn't win immunity there.
And the answer might be yes. Like that
It
person
might
could be Sasha.
What it could be is if okay, so maybe it's the four Bion, the what they planned on. It's Jeremy, Spencer, well, Bion, Spencer,
He was
Tasha,
violent at some
Jimmy.
point, yeah.
Yeah, not at the same time as Tasha, but whatever. But it's those guys. Let's remember, Tasha won three. Like we might think, oh, Spencer's probably gonna win immunity. Tasha won three immunity in Cagayan.
Right.
So she could. At that point, you got to decide whether you're trying to get rid of Spencer or Jeremy.
Right, and
That's a tough decision.
That is.
It's a tough decision.
It also might be the fact that if Kelly's still there, people might be looking at Kelly and thinking, oh, she has all those other votes, that people within our alliance, that could be split up within our alliance, but that are definitely going to her. You don't necessarily know if she's going to win or not, but the fact of the matter is, that she has a different story than you do, and that's the most dangerous story, the different story. And Kelly would have the most different story. She'd have that underdog story, and I think you could make a case to get rid of Kelly there rather than Jeremy. I don't know if that would work, but I do think there are outs for him to get to the end if he gets to 4. I just think that's the one tricky vote for him.
Yeah, I do think to your point, he's got 2 more shields left at 4.
Another
2 potential shields.
Another possibility, if
yes.
I may say real quick. If Keith is among the final 4, Jeremy could perhaps just confuse him enough to force a tie.
I am not the one you want to vote for.
What's difficult is at Final 4, Jeremy might be the only person left that Keith knows their name of, so he just writes it down.
Jeremy.
But no, clearly he knows how to write Tasha's name down because he did that once before. Let's talk about Keith. Keith
I love Keith.
Discuss. Yeah, no, that was so great. I loved everything about that.
Spencer's little girl over there, and Tasha has her cousin Jeremy about they're solid. So, what?
Yeah, oh hell, I don't know. And it's like we believe you, Keith. We believe that there is no big plan to any of this.
I have to say, this is the first time in a very long time. Like, it was clear he was probably going to win. And, I was texting my mom. I'm like, who is he going to pick?
Yeah, I knew one. I figured, Kelly, just for the payback. But then I'm like,
right.
Yeah, payback, and he kind of knows
Abby, too. He doesn't want to be on that reward with Abby.
You don't want to pick Abby. Yeah, I was like, I don't know, man. What's he going to do?
I was thinking maybe Jeremy, and it'd be like a San Juan del Sur thing, because they had that scene about the 3 Hayatans or whatever. But, totally validating San Juan del Sur as a great season. Remember all the great moments of Kelly, Keith, and...
Shush. You had your rant. It's over. It's over.
These are called callbacks in the biz. But, yeah.
I majored in screenwriting. I know what a fucking callback is.
Purple Rock After Dark.
Here.
Have funny
it was great, and what it almost led to me, I have a more ideal Final 3 that, I've constructed elaborate scenarios to get us to, but Keith in the Final 3, making his case in front of a jury, arguing why they should vote for him. If somebody comes at him with a "you were useless," defend yourself, that would be worth its weight in gold, would it not?
Yeah, that would be entertaining. I would like to watch Keith try to reason with people.
If there's Keith with 2 very viable candidates, that would be great. Like if it's Keith and Jeremy and Kelly, or Spencer and Jeremy, or Spencer and Kelly, not.
Yeah, it would be Tasha and Kimmy. It'd be all like, "Oh no, we thought this would be fun."
Yeah, agreed. And nothing, not to take away from their games, but it's just I think those are the 3 that that have that we'd least like to see win. Mm-hmm. We'd rather see Jeremy, Spencer, or Kelly win.
I mean, if it was those 3 at that point, honestly, I might be like, you know what? Let's go with Kimmy because she's done pretty well and she needs it. you
I
know.
kind of feel like Kimmy's played a good game. It's just that
She's
she's not winning. That's why we're not seeing her.
No, yeah, and I agree with that. But I can see, like, if I myself am thinking that, I can see the jury, if that was the final three, being like, they were pretty equal, and as much as they probably don't normally vote on need, when like you've got the retired guy and like the single accountant, and
Yep.
then the single mom with the sick kid and the harder life, it's gonna be hard to not help
That
that.
they all watched on TV, 15 years
Yeah,
ago.
when they were younger, like.
Because the person that wasn't watching is Keith, and he's right there. But the rest of them were all
and
watching. Maybe not
and
Sierra.
what and played a pretty loyal game, and actually did, like, stuck with people, and like wasn't like, she's the we see her as a goat because she's not playing as hard as some people, and because she's not being edited the same way. That's why she's clearly the not winner to us.
Right.
Yeah, I called her, the best goat in our, mid-season poll. I'm backtracking on that. I actually, and we discussed this, and Matt agreed
I
with
think
me
so,
because
I think
it's great.
he's wrong.
I think Kimmy might actually be one of those jury threats that we never hear about until like one day they're all talking to us. Oh, we got to take out Kimmy. We can't let her get in front of the jury because I do think she would get, obviously, the sympathy vote you're talking about, which is, one of the aces in Jeremy's hole that he's trying to, hold back on. So I could see that being a threat to him. But I also think just socially, I think, you know, she's there, man. We thought she would be out first, and it sounds like if they had lost, she might have been. But she's made true bonds. She's been able to work at least once with the other side. People are receptive. I think she's been warm to people, which has
Yeah, I
probably
was
been pretty
I was kind of
good.
touched with her reaction to Tasha and all that
Yeah.
during like the drowning scene, and obviously she had a really good relationship with Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's been on the right side of more votes. I think the only vote that she wasn't on the right side of was the Wiggles one. Well, and the Idols.
I don't, but whatever, you can't really
Yeah.
be blamed
Yeah.
for that.
But I think she was in the majority on every other vote except for Wiggles.
Yeah, and I think there'd also just be a respect factor. She
Yeah.
is the only person that played Survivor longer than a year ago, and
Yeah.
I think that'll weigh for some of these people, especially since the jury isn't as full of all these recent players as the game is.
Right. No, I mean, I think Kimmy has a case. I
And
think the reason we're not seeing it is because she's not making that final three.
yeah. And like, not only is she the only old school left, but she, like Kelly, was voted out early. So her Survivor experience was 15 years ago and for like 15 days.
Yeah, it was very brief.
So
Yeah,
the
no,
fact that she made it this far, I mean, on its own and not dragged along, like, I would not say that was what her game was, is actually really impressive.
I think she's played a good game.
and I think she'd have a great story. So I do think that this is one of those, day 37 conversations where Spencer and Jeremy are kind of sitting around panicking, like, oh my God, do we really want to like be up against this story and all that? Especially if they're starting to feel maybe some heat coming off of the jury towards them,
Right.
It's
and
like,
maybe.
It could be like Jerry in Heroes versus Villains, where all of a sudden at Final Four they're like, Jerry would win. And you're
or
like, wait, would she? Oh, wait, she might, yeah, I could see that. And then they vote her out.
or like or like Steven and JT, cutting Taj early, even though Taj obviously didn't have quite the story Kimmy did. But that, and it was hard for them. Like, I fully, believe that it was a difficult decision for them because they cared about Taj.
Yeah, and to Matt's earlier point, Kimmy has a different story than them.
Yes.
If you're Jeremy and Spencer, maybe you're not worried about the other one in the final situation so much, because you feel like your stories are the same, but yours is better.
Right.
Like, I'll put my cards up against theirs. But
Right.
Kimmy is a completely different thing, and if your read on the jury is incorrect, then you could be out. Now, no, to be clear, no one here is arguing that Kimmy is winning Survivor Cambodia. She is not winning Survivor Cambodia.
I think we can
But
all-
that's an edit thing. In the
Mhm.
game, she might actually be more threatening than we've been giving her credit for. And just as a final thought, because I'm guessing we're not going to talk too much about her next week. Good for her. I think she
Yeah.
played well, and I feel a little bad that we didn't get enough of her. They probably could have spared us a little bit more Kimmy time and maybe a little less, Steven time or something.
How dare you?
Well, I know it was really important to invest all that time at the beginning of the Steven versus Savage story because that had a tremendous payoff for both of them.
To be fair...
Okay, I'll give you that.
Yeah, I think that story was entirely summed up.
Also, way to attack us both.
I mean, yeah, seriously.
That was brutal.
Equal opportunity attack there. Not cool.
Someone is jealous of blackjack and hookers.
That's right.
But no, I mean that's just one thing that struck me. Like when Savage got voted out, it's like, wow,
They bonded. I have to admit.
that was a great story to hit. And then some people came back at me. It's like, well, they're doing that to set up Steven, growing and overcoming. Not so much. So really, that whole thing seemed to be designed to piss people on the internet off.
Yeah, that was weird.
Or to make Steven look, and conversely, to make Steven look like a dolt and Savage look awesome for one group. And then, what it brought to our lives is a bunch of people like Savage is the Antichrist. So maybe instead they could have built up a bit of a Kimmy's underdog story, which obviously isn't paying off for a win, but it paid off to a trip to the final. She is making the final 6, whereas previously she was in the first 6.
Right. Yeah. I would not argue with that.
I have just one last thought for Keith because we moved on to Kimmy. I just want to say, if Keith were to play again in like maybe a year or two before like age really sets in, could we book his ticket to the final episode? Is he just kind of a guy that will always get this far?
Kind of?
I mean, obviously, we don't have a ton of data. It's only happened twice. But he's capable enough in challenges that he's an asset.
You're never going to
phase.
If he gets to the final 3 and lose it, which he would, then I would say yes. If he constantly keeps getting like that close, they might find themselves being like nervous about him. Like he's just getting cut right before the finals every time.
Yeah, eventually it could be like what the argument against Abby is. Like, they're not winning, but that Keith is going to take our spot because if we let him stick around, he's always going to stick around. But he's just not a threat. And some people have been out there. It's like, why didn't they vote out Keith? They got to vote out Keith. He could go on a winning streak, and it's like, who cares?
What? Then
Keith winning that jury vote.
Then nobody gets mad at you for like taking him to the end instead of them because you couldn't vote him out.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the worry is if you're the player that needs to win one immunity to stay in. If you're Spencer or Jeremy and you go out Final 4. But it's just like taking out Keith never seems to be a priority, and he is useful, and he can keep himself around. So I almost think that until he gets too old to really do this, that he might just always be somebody that we're going to see a long time if he were to come back. Final person to talk about, Tasha. Does anybody have any real thoughts about Tasha?
I think Tasha is going to be very disappointed with her outcome, and I don't think it's because she's going to get voted out.
What he's saying is she's not getting any votes in the final tribal council.
That's exactly what I'm saying. I don't know why I'm being late here.
No, it was clever. It was clever.
Okay.
Was it? I mean, I knew what he meant. I think it was neither confusing nor clever.
Congratulate Matt. That's rule number 1 of podcasting.
What is Tasha's path to victory? Because I don't see one.
Yeah. Because, as we were saying, like, I don't think it's a guarantee that she could win against Kimmy, and that means there's not enough people for her to go against in the end.
But I think she might be able to. Like,
right. That's her best bet.
Yeah, her best bet is Kimmy and Keith. And she might win that. She has some people who I think would vote for her, for sure in that situation. The problem is that Tasha's game resembles both Jeremy and Spencer's game, but I don't think that the moves that she has made independent of them are as noticeable, are as game-changing. If you look at Tasha's move, Tasha took out Abby.
Yeah, and that's not as impressive as taking out Wigglesworth.
Or Steven.
Yeah. No, I mean,
again,
Steven, obviously.
To them, Wigglesworth was like seen as because of her
people thought Wigglesworth was a threat to win.
She wasn't to us because she wasn't on the show. It's the same as like Kimmy. I think the real problem for Tasha is, sorry, there's a hair in my face, is her social game.
Yeah.
Is because people don't like her.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Savage likes her. Everyone
Savage
else,
likes
I
her a
mean,
lot, but I don't know if Savage
Kimmy
votes for
likes her.
her over Jeremy.
I
Right.
don't think he does.
Yeah, I think
Kimmy seems to like her. Will she like her if she gets voted at, cut at Final Four or five? Um, does Kimmy like her better than Jeremy, who she's been with the entire game,
Right.
who has kids like her, who has a closer to the same story as her.
who might cry when he drops the baby knowledge on them. Yeah, I think what you're getting at, because I do think that because we don't necessarily like Tasha much, we might be overstating a bit that Tasha isn't well liked.
No, but I mean, it is said in the exit interviews.
Right, by people who were on the other side, like by Jeff Varner or something. I think that's been the big one. But to your point about her social game, and Steven kind of alluded to this in his blog, she runs deep on the people she's with.
Yeah.
And very shallow on the people that she's not.
Mm-hmm.
And the big problem with that is she will most likely be sitting next to two people she's with.
Right.
And there's not going to be a whole lot of people that on the jury to help her with that.
Yeah.
So I think she's kind of drawing dead.
I think she might be, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this is indicative of her game in general. This was the flaw in Cagayan, in that she decided she was with some of these people and kind of didn't really have a lot of time for Cass. And and then it's the same, like, there were opportunities for the game to flip because Tony opened the door, and those people still were never really like, okay, Tasha, like they listened to her enough for the producers to construct the 153rd edition of Women's Alliance talk. But the reality, we've heard, is that like Trish never had any intention of ever working with Tasha. In fact, she was very afraid of her.
She got stood up by LJ.
That's right. LJ didn't even go to the meeting, and I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's it for Tasha. I think she's really good at building bonds with people that she can relate to, people she can work with, and people that are useful to her in the game, and not so good with the others, which probably also speaks to the fact that for the past 2 weeks she's had opportunities to go with people that maybe she would have a better shot at winning against, if not necessarily getting to the end to the points we made earlier. And she instead, no, let me stay with these bonds that I've worked hard to make.
Right.
And I think it's a good stay in the game long strategy. I don't think it's a good winning strategy because, one of the big things that Sandra did in Heroes vs. Villains, besides not be Russell Hantz, was she had very good relationships across the aisle, whereas like Parvati, I don't think did. And I think this is kind of that case, not to suggest for even a second that Tasha is a Parvati level player.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so that's where those people are at heading into the final. What's going to happen? We have 6 people in a final episode, and we've been promised something huge that's never happened in 31 seasons of Survivor. What's that thing?
We think it's the double idol, all votes canceled. I think we all think that, right?
I do. I mean, I thought that was going to happen this week, but I actually didn't think it was going to happen this week. I was just putting it out there into the universe to see if it would happen. And it looks like I did. It's just they got the mail late in the time stream.
You're from Canada. It takes longer for the thought,
It's true. Because Canada Post is not as efficient as the USPS. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
We pay twice as much, and we don't even get things delivered to our door. Great Canadian to take for all 5 of you out there. But yes, I think that's going to happen. Because it's not even that outlandish now, right? 2 tribal councils and 2 people quite likely to draw a lot of votes, and
I actually think it's very likely, because here's the thing.
Very likely.
I don't think they're going to split the vote. If Kelly plays her idol, Jeremy is going to know to play his.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's if that's at 6. If it's at 5, he's just doing it anyway.
Yeah.
Right. But but even if it's at 6, if Kelly plays her idol and he knows all the votes are on Kelly, then Jeremy's like, "What if this is me? I got to play my idol," and he's going to play.
Spencer's immune. then he's doing it for sure.
Oh,
That's an excellent point too.
yeah, which is actually I think what might happen. You know, and then someone else is going to be going home because I think in that situation, I think it's going to be a revote with 3 people that can't be voted for.
Yeah, and like it should be noted that they could split the vote. It could be 2-2-2-2,
It
but for the same reason they didn't split the vote a couple times this one. That's handing a lot of power over to one person that decides, yeah, I wouldn't mind teaming up with Keith and Kelly.
Yep.
So yeah, I think they wouldn't split the vote. To your point, so I think it's gonna happen. I really do. I think there's like and now the one knock on that is I've been wrong about every prediction. But
You have.
Really, it's almost impressive.
But I'm not predicting who's going to go. Well, I mean, I will predict who's going to go as a result, but the prediction I'm sticking to it's going to happen, and it's going to be awesome. And it also fits with like the clip we showed, which is Jeff Probst like holding an urn at a tribal council, which is like wouldn't fit for some of the other ideas that have been bounced out there, like a tie at the final tribal.
Actually, that would. Because
would it?
Yeah.
What was he wearing?
Urn with all the votes there at the final tribal.
What was he wearing in the clip?
Feel like he was in reunion clothes.
Yeah.
No. But I think they probably check the urn before they go to the reunion just to see if there's a tie. Let's be honest.
That's true. They're not going to wait like 3 months and then get to Los Angeles and then wait, we got a tie. We'll figure out what to do. America, you decide. You voted for second chance. You voted now.
This, because I think the tiebreaker is going to be the third place person cast a vote, and I don't think they would want that person to be tainted by what they saw on TV.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that could be it. That would be pretty awesome too.
That would be more awesome. I'm not gonna lie. That would be the best.
It's just it feels like that double idol thing is just so likely.
Double idol thing super likely. The other thing not as likely.
And then the one other thing people have been floating around is that it's a Final Four. We can kill that dead right now. CBS has come out in their write-up for the next episode of the journey to the Final Three. So don't worry about that, which is good because I think that would be a huge mistake. Like
I agree.
Game-ruining mistake.
There is a fourth option, and that is that Keith gets something right. I don't think that's going to happen either, though.
Shout out, John! You have one of your jokes. So that's our prediction for what the big thing is. We're not going to predict, the boot order in this podcast. We will in an article on our website that you can check out next week, so that you can, plan your predictions against what mine are. Just pick the other way. It worked out well for Emma this week, picking Abby Maria right before it was about to.
Complete random, like. Literally, in case anyone who saw my tweets or something or read our prediction post thought I was exaggerating, John sent me the link of what he uses to shuffle our names when he does the fantasy. I did that. The top was Abby Maria, and it worked.
Now here's a question: did you actually hit shuffle, or was it the alphabetical order?
No, I swear to God, I
was
actually
it like
hit
me
shuffle.
not hitting, start broadcast earlier tonight?
No, I hit shuffle, man.
So let's predict who's going to win. Who's the winner of Survivor Cambodia? We discussed all 6 players heading in, what their chances are and all of that. Now it's time to lay it out there. Who do you think is going to win? Matt.
I've been saying Jeremy since the 4th episode? Maybe even earlier than that? But at least the 4th episode that I've been on record. I'm going to stick with Jeremy. I think Jeremy's going to win.
All right, Emma, you've been saying Kelly since the preseason.
Since pregame, yeah. So, I mean, I kind of just feel like I gotta stick to it, just right, because it's like the match game or whatever, when it's like you have your thing, and it's like, or you could do door number 2 or whatever.
But isn't the Monty Hall thing that you should pick door number 2?
Yeah, the Monty Hall problem. You should always switch. You should always switch in the Monty Hall problem. Come on.
But I don't know. In the auction, that doesn't always work out. So
I think it worked out with the first one, but not the second one. But
yeah.
Who knows? Because they
technically Cochran was wrong. The auction choice offered by Jeff is not a Monty Hall problem.
I don't even.
Take that, Cochran.
I don't
So you're saying Kelly?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, although I will say I don't think it's really strongly either way. I would be equally, or not quite equally. I would be like pretty equally happy with Kelly or Jeremy. A little happier with Kelly, but I really like Jeremy too. I'd be fine with Spencer. I wouldn't be thrilled.
Yeah, so I said Kelly at the quarter season mark, basically just pivoting from my disastrous Monica prediction for the same reasons that, the all-star who is the least likely is often the one that has success. I'd say that kind of has already bore fruit, and I think that also bears into her how she's flying under the radar. It could just be because these are a bunch of ego-driven fame whores who don't think that the person who was sixth in a terrible season is worthy of being there.
Mediocre season.
There you go, people. See, there's somebody on Purple Rock who's willing to call San Juan del Sur mediocre.
I have planted this flag for a long time.
She's right. She's saying it's not so bad. And I should clarify, every time we talk about something like that, it's like, what about the Redemption Island? What about that? It's like, the existence of worse seasons doesn't make something good. No one's suggesting that San Juan del Sur is the worst season in the history of the show. Because
it's Nicaragua. We all know that.
And then
come at me.
She's got a toucan, so. Oh yeah, toque discussion. We gotta bring back the toque discussion.
Oh yeah, if you guys missed it, we discussed toques on the podcast.
That's the Canadian word, the proper word for what you call a beanie. I say it's the proper word because it's highly likely that it was invented in Canada. I mean, like, who else would construct a wool hat but Canadians? Anyway, mid-season, I thought it was Jeremy. I thought all the indications pointed there. He seemed to be getting a winner's edit. I am going to go out on a limb and say I'm going to go back to Kelly. I think Kelly's the winner. I know. Sorry, everyone.
I thought you were going to do Spencer there. Go for the three.
I did too. You said you were going out on a limb. It's not out on a limb to pick someone that I already picked and you picked previously.
I know. Maybe out on a limb was an exaggeration, but I do think what really stuck it for me, why I thought that, is just how the camera lingered on her at Tribal Council. As the votes were being read, as they were being sent off, as some of the discussions were being made, it felt like this might be that low-key winner's edit that they give to women. Where you have to look for it. What's out in the open is a Spencer or a Jeremy, as in like Samoa, it's a Russell. But then you kind of see there's the little breadcrumbs dropped for a Natalie White or a Sophie, and maybe that's what's happening here. And also, kind of like Emma, I think Kelly would make me the most happy. So why not predict it? I would also be pretty thrilled with a Jeremy win because we haven't gotten a Jeremy-type winner ever. I mean, his style of gameplay, certainly. I think he's just basically playing a solid game of Survivor. But basically a minority male in a non-minority-driven season has not happened. Earl happened in a season where the minority was the majority.
I was running through all the winners in my head, but yes, I would agree.
If you're casting all minorities as like one group, then they were the majority.
Yeah, the non-whites were outnumbered the whites in Fiji. Yeah. And that, I've had a theory just in the past that seems to be the conditions that will work out. And it was the same with Cook Islands and Yule, obviously, right?
Right.
The season race isn't a factor at all.
God, they really are the only ones, huh?
A lot more minorities this season than they traditionally do. But Jeremy's just been able to operate as a player as opposed to like kind of a representative of like the lone black man, which tends to happen more often in Survivor. So I think that would be cool. But I don't know. I was repping Kelly Wentworth, the preseason San Juan del Sur. So this is all about me and how it would make it. I just think it'd be more fun if she was able to pull it off, and I think it's possible.
And this is where Andy should then now apologize to all the Kelly Wentworth fans because he has not been right all season about anything.
Wouldn't it be glorious that I get everything wrong, including like 6 through 2, but I get the winner right? Well, come at me.
That would be amazing.
That'd be a true Kelly Wentworth underdog story that I'm living myself in predictions. So yeah, that's who we're predicting. How that happens, how it gets there, we will write it up. I actually have a crazily elaborate theories on how it can get to there. Basically, I
Of course
figured
you
out what
do.
I want to happen, and then I just reverse engineered it to happen because prior to last week, I was actually like making legitimate attempts to try and piece together what would happen based on the edit, and that hasn't worked at all. So now,
You're in the
as
realm of fan fiction.
that's right. So now you can, as a teaser, find out how I will construct not only a Kelly Wentworth win, but a final three of Jeremy, Spencer, and Kelly. It's gonna happen. So you can find that out on our website. That's at purplerockpodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter. Purple Rock Pod is the show. Purple Rock Andy is this guy, and you guys are
Purple Rock
Matt.
and Purple Rock Emma.
Where's our Tumblr, Emma?
purplerockpodcast.tumblr.com. And go on it because I used the power of our influence to ask for a GIF, and someone did it. And it's amazing, and it makes me so happy. Not just that I was able to make it happen, but what it is, which is those of you who already follow me on Twitter know that I find the, like, Jeremy, the teaches Spencer how to love story arc to be like the funniest thing in the world, and it makes me really happy because it's such a weird Survivor story, and
It really is a
so
weird one.
it's so good though. And so when Spencer last week said "I love you" to Marcella, and you see Jeremy like applauding and looking so happy, and so someone their Tumblr username, which these Tumblr kids they change their URLs a lot, but right now it's like there's dashes in there, so I'm probably gonna get it wrong, but it's like Keith on a tuk tuk. But if you go on our Tumblr, you'll see you can go to that person's blog. But made the gif of Spencer kissing his girlfriend and it's saying, Spencer, I love you, and then you just see Jeremy like
Clapping at the
and
proud papa.
smiling.
Yeah.
It makes me
Jer-
so happy.
yeah,
Like,
Jeremy's like, I did that.
yeah, like
Here's a thought related to that I just had. So Spencer, if he makes it to the final tribal, he will clearly bust out the narrative that he's been driving. That I learned to be a real boy, and I learned the importance of relationships, and that's what I was focused on. And then, could it be cool if Jeremy just usurps him? It's like, yeah, I taught him that. That was me.
Yeah,
I did that.
That'd be so good.
And you know how I taught him how to love? Because I'm so filled with the love for my wife Val, who, by the way,
Is
pregnant.
It was a pretty great moment, everyone, when Spencer was kissing his girlfriend and saying "I love you" for the first time. But you know what happened just before that?
You know what,
My
Val?
beautiful wife, who I love more than anything, who I've played this game for twice, told me that we're having our first son. Mic drop! So watch for that. That's my other prediction. That in the final three, when it happens, that Kelly is able to usurp them, that conversation goes on. I have it all figured out. I have the double idol play, that. I've been harnessing my predictive powers for this 1 week. Send us an email at purplerockpodcast@gmail.com, and we apologize for the technical glitches and the rambling of this episode, but I don't apologize for the lack of John. You're welcome for that. You're welcome. Any last thoughts, guys?
I hope live TV was as fun for you as it was for us.
Yeah, I had fun with this. If you guys, because this was a pretty straightforward episode, if any of you listening have an idea of what you'd like me to write about this week, let me know. Drawn blanks.
Historical moments of survivors forgetting the names of the people they're playing with. That's one.
Wait,
and that
what?
is also.
That's
right, exactly. It's another holdover. My God, San Juan del Sur
it's Reed that's on our
has
team.
unlocked this entire season. I don't even know why I'm trolling San Juan del Sur at this point. It's fine.
That's
now that I can't hear you guys, I'm just going to end the show. Is that all right?
That's
sure.
good. Do it.
All right, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Bye.